We're heading into the few weeks of the year when a weedy lawn can actually be turned around instead of just tolerated for another season. Dandelions and clover taking over the front yard, thin patches where the grass gave up over summer. Hit this window right and the lawn comes back thick and green next spring. Miss it and you're looking at the same mess this time next year. My name is Lenny and I've spent the last 20 years working on lawns. Before you touch a bag of seed, there's something you have to understand because it's the reason so many reseeding jobs fail before the seed even leaves the bag. Think about how a weed actually ends up in a lawn in the first place. A seed lands on the ground and for it to grow, it needs light hitting bare soil. In a thick, healthy lawn, that seed lands on a dense mat of grass blades and never reaches the soil underneath. So it never gets any light and it never sprouts. It just sits there and dies off. Weeds don't push their way into healthy grass, they fill in the empty spaces where the grass has already thinned out. So when you're looking at a lawn that's mostly weeds, you're really looking at a lawn where the grass thinned out first, and the weeds only showed up afterwards to take over the bare ground. That changes everything about what you do next because it means killing the weeds on their own gets you almost nowhere. If you spray everything dead and don't get grass back into those gaps, you're left with bare soil, and bare soil is the exact surface weeds want. One season later, you're right back where you started, except now you've paid for the herbicide too. The real solution is getting your grass thick enough to fill those gaps back in, and that means seeding, but only if you put it down in the right order, and that's where most people get it wrong. There are a handful of ways to blow the timing, and I want to walk through them in order of how much damage they do. Let's start with the biggest one by a wide margin, because if this applies to you, nothing else in this video really matters until you sort it out. I'm talking about pre-emergent herbicide, which is the active ingredient in crabgrass preventer and shows up in most bags labeled weed and feed too. Pre-emergent works by killing seeds as they germinate. It lays down a barrier in the soil that goes after the first root and shoot a seed puts out, before anything ever breaks the surface. And it can't tell the difference between a weed seed and a grass seed, so it kills both just as well. That barrier stays active in your soil for roughly 12 weeks after you put it down. So picture what plays out in millions of yards every year. In spring, you do the responsible thing and put down crabgrass preventer. 2 months later, you look at the lawn, figure it could use some thickening up, and you spread grass seed. Nothing comes up, not a single blade. So you decide the seed was junk or the lawn is beyond saving, and you start pricing out sod. But the seed was fine. It germinated, it pushed out its first root, and that root ran straight into the chemical barrier you laid down 8 weeks earlier and died underground. You paid for weed prevention, and it worked exactly like the bag said it would. It just also works on the thing you were trying to grow. So before you spread anything, step one is walking into the garage and reading the bags of whatever's been going down on that lawn. If anything with the pre-emergent has been on there in the last 3 months, your seeding date is set by that 12-week clock. Not by the calendar and not by how motivated you are on a Saturday morning. That's the free check I mentioned at the start, and getting it wrong costs you an entire season. And that's really what all of this comes down to. Doing the right thing at the right time instead of guessing and hoping. If you're serious about fixing your lawn, you're going to need the right equipment and a proper plan. And that's exactly why I wrote this book. It's a simple step-by-step blueprint to a greener lawn with the weeds gone for good in just 30 days. And it takes you through what to buy, where to get it, and when to put it down. Scan the QR code on the screen or click the link below to grab your copy. All right, back to the traps that are costing people their whole season. The second mistake is the same idea as the first with different numbers on it, and it's about post-emergent timing. Post-emergent herbicide is what you spray on weeds that are already up. The selective broadleaf killers that take out dandelions and clover without touching your grass. These are genuinely useful products, and on a weedy lawn, they're often the right first move, but they stick around too. As a rule of thumb, you want 4 to 6 weeks between spraying a post-emergent and dropping seed. With most common broadleaf products, you'll see a recommendation of at least 3 to 4 weeks, and some of the newer formulations are built to break down faster and let you seed sooner. But you have to actually read that specific label instead of guessing. And here's the squeeze this creates, which is the part most people don't plan for. The best window for overseeding most lawns is late summer into early fall. So if you spray too late in the season, by the time your waiting period is up, you've missed the seeding window and you're sitting out the whole year. Sequencing isn't a small detail here, it's the whole ball game. The third thing is the $2 step in the title, and I bet most of you have never heard of it. When people reseed bare or thin patches, the standard move is to spread a thin layer of topsoil over the seed. It keeps the seed in contact with the ground. It holds moisture, and it keeps the birds off. Totally sensible. You grab a bag of topsoil at the garden center, spread it, done. Except that bag of topsoil is full of weed seed. Read that again, because it explains a lot of frustration. You fought weeds all spring, you finally got around to reseeding, and 6 weeks later that patch is full of new weeds, including a few kinds you've never seen in your yard before. You didn't fail, you planted them. They came in with the top dressing. The fix is simple and cheap. Instead of topsoil, use a sterilized top, dressing like peat moss or coconut coir. The same starter material people use for seed starting indoors. It's been treated, so there's no viable weed seed in it, which means you're planting grass and only grass. A small bag runs a couple of bucks and covers plenty of area for spot work. And it's the difference between reseeding that thickens your lawn and reseeding that plants a fresh crop of weeds in the exact spots you just cleared. That one step is why I titled the video the way I did. It's not glamorous, it costs almost nothing, and skipping it undoes everything else you did right. The fourth thing is skipping the ground prep, and it wrecks more reseeding jobs than bad seed ever has. Grass seed needs direct contact with soil to germinate. It can't sprout sitting on top of a thatch layer or hard compacted ground. It has to work its way down and touch actual dirt, so overseeding without loosening the soil first tanks your germination rate. Not a little, a lot. If your soil is compacted, and most lawns that have gone weedy are, then aerating first isn't an optional upgrade. It's the difference between most of your seed taking and most of it feeding the birds. The compaction test costs you nothing. Push a long screwdriver into the soil. In decent ground, it slides in several inches without much effort. If it stops dead after an inch or two, you're compacted, and seed spread on that surface is mostly wasted. When you're compacted, core aeration is the answer, the kind that pulls actual plugs out of the ground, not the spiky shoes that just push the compaction sideways and make it worse. And here's a bonus you get almost for free. Aerating right before you overseed leaves thousands of little holes that work as perfect seed pockets. The seed drops in, it's protected, it's in direct contact with soil, and it's shaded from drying out. Aerating and overseeding on the same day is one of the highest return combinations in all of lawn care. Now, there's one exception to the pre-emergent rule I gave you earlier, and it's worth knowing because it solves the timing squeeze completely. There's a pre-emergent that plays nice with grass seed. The active ingredient is mesotrain, and you'll see it sold under brand names like Tenacity. It's selective in a really useful way. It stops crabgrass and clover from coming up, but still lets your grass seed germinate, and it'll even take out some weeds that manage to sprout through it. You put it down at the time of overseeding or before your new seed germinates. One important thing to know though, it works well with cool season grasses like fescue, Kentucky bluegrass, and perennial ryegrass, but it can damage some warm season grasses. So if you're down south with St. Augustine or something similar, check carefully before you reach for it. For a lot of people though, that's the one tool that lets you handle weed prevention and seeding in the same season instead of having to pick one. Now let's talk about which weeds actually force you to wait before seeding, because I don't want to send you out overseeding into a situation where it can't work no matter what else you do right. There are 3 cases where you'll hold off on seed and deal with the weeds first. The first is heavy creeping weeds, ground ivy, which a lot of people call creeping Charlie, along with nutsedge and bindweed. These don't just compete with your new seedlings, they physically smother them by forming a mat that grows right over the top of anything trying to come up. Seeding into that is throwing money on the ground. The second case is a thick mat of crabgrass, and here's something about crabgrass that catches people out. It's an annual, so it dies on its own once cold weather hits, which sounds like good news, and partly it is. But if it's grown into a heavy mat, that dead thatch physically blocks new seed from reaching the soil underneath. So the mat has to come out first, whether that means raking, dethatching, or scalping the area low. The third case is a serious broadleaf infestation. If more than about half your lawn is dandelions, plantain, or clover, you're better off treating them first and planning to seed a few weeks later than trying to thread the needle. Outside of those 3 cases though, you can usually just overseed and let the new grass do the work, especially going into fall. Annual weeds die off over winter anyway, And your new grass gets a real head start in spring, while the weeds have to restart from seed all over again. Now let's talk about the seed itself, because this is another place where people lose real money without realizing it. Not all grass seed is the same, and the cheapest bag on the shelf is usually cheap for a reason. There are two things you want to look at when you pick a bag up. First one is matching the seed to your climate. Cool season grasses, fescues, Kentucky bluegrass, perennial ryegrass, do well in northern climates and grow hardest in spring and fall. Warm season grasses like Bermuda, zoysia, and St. Augustine are for the south, and they grow hardest in summer heat. Put the wrong category down and you're fighting your climate every single season, and you will lose that fight. Second one is easy to check right there in the aisle. Read the label for weed seed content and for filler. Cheap seed blends often contain a percentage of other crop seed and even weed seed, and a lot of them are loaded with annual ryegrass, which comes up beautifully fast and then dies, which is exactly why the lawn looks great for 6 weeks and then goes thin again. A good bag will list its contents clearly, and the weed seed percentage will be very low. You also want to match the seed to whatever grass you already have if you can. Overseeding fescue into a bluegrass lawn will grow just fine, but it'll always look like two different lawns because the blade texture and the colors are different. And one last thing on seed that saves people real money: check the date on the bag, as grass seed loses viability as it ages. And a bag that's been sitting in a shed through a hot summer and a cold winter can have way lower germination than the label claims. Buy fresh, buy it close to when you're actually going to use it, and store what's left somewhere cool and dry instead of a hot garage. Nobody thinks about seed as perishable, but it absolutely is. Now for the part that costs nothing at all, and it might be the single highest value thing in this entire video. Raise your mower. That's a tip, and here's why it works so well. Remember the core idea from earlier. Weed seeds need light on soil to germinate. Now think about what mowing height actually does. Cut your grass short and you open the canopy so sunlight reaches the ground between the blades. And now every weed seed in your yard has exactly the conditions it needs. Cut it taller and the grass shades its own soil, and those seeds never get the light they need to sprout. Taller grass also grows deeper roots, which makes it more drought tolerant, which keeps it thicker through summer stress, which closes more gaps, and it builds on itself season after season. Most people mow short because they think it looks tidier and it means mowing less often, and they've been growing weeds for years without realizing it. Raising the deck a notch or two is free. It takes 10 seconds and it cuts down your weed pressure every single week for the rest of the season. While we're on free adjustments, one more. Don't spray post-emergent on grass that's just coming out of dormancy in spring. Selective herbicide isn't supposed to harm your grass, but turf that's still waking up is stressed and it handles it badly. Wait until the lawn is uniformly green and actively growing, and you've mowed it a few times before you spray anything. Spray too early and you stress the grass you're trying to save, which thins it out further, which lets in more weeds, and now you're going backwards. Watering is the next thing to cover because more new seed dies from watering mistakes than from anything else. Germination is completely different from normal lawn watering, and this trips up people who otherwise know exactly what they're doing. Established grass wants deep, infrequent watering because that's what drives the roots downward. A seed has no roots yet though. It's sitting there in the top ½ inch of soil, and if that ½ inch dries out even once after germination has started, the seedling dies. There's no bringing it back. So while you're waiting for germination, you want the opposite of your normal routine. Light and frequent, enough to keep the surface consistently damp several times a day in hot weather without soaking it. You're not trying to water the soil profile, you're just trying to keep that top layer from drying out. Then, once the new grass is up and you've mowed it a couple of times, you switch to deep and infrequent and you keep it there. That switch is what pushes the roots down and makes the new grass actually durable, instead of a shallow carpet that browns off the first hot week of summer. And a related point people miss: stay off the seeded area. New seedlings are fragile, and foot traffic across a germinating patch will kill a surprising amount of it. So let's put all of this together into an actual order of operations you can follow. Step 1, take inventory of what's gone onto that lawn in the last 12 weeks. Any pre-emergent, including anything labeled as weed and feed, sets your seeding date, so go and read the bags in the garage before you do anything else. Step 2, identify what you're actually fighting, whether that's broadleaf weeds like dandelion and clover, grassy weeds like crabgrass, or creeping weeds like ground ivy and nutsedge, because these need different treatments and different timelines. And grassy weeds are considerably harder to deal with than broadleaf. Step 3, if you're in one of the 3 hold-off cases, treat now and mark the calendar 4 to 6 weeks out, checking the label for its specific seeding interval. Step 4, prep the ground, which means core aerating if the screwdriver test says you're compacted, and raking or dethatching to clear dead mat so the seed can reach soil. Step 5, choose seed that matches your climate and your existing grass, and check the label for weed seed in filler. Step 6, seed in the right window, which for most lawns means late summer into early fall, when the soil is still warm enough for germination, the brutal heat has broken, and weed pressure is dropping. Step 7, top dress with sterilized peat moss or coir, and not topsoils, and this is the $2 step that everybody skips. Step 8, water light and frequent until germination. Then switch over to deep and infrequent once it's established, and stay off it while it's coming up. Step 9, raise your mower and keep it raised. And step 10, plan to do it again next fall, because a lawn that's gone mostly weeds usually doesn't come all the way back in a single season. 2 rounds of overseeding across 2 falls will transform it, 1 round will improve it, and expecting a total turnaround in 6 weeks is exactly how people give up right before it starts working. You almost certainly don't need to kill your lawn and start from bare dirt, because that route is expensive, it's brutal work, and it leaves you with the most weed-friendly surface there is. Most lawns that look like a lost cause are actually recoverable, because the grass isn't gone, it's just been outnumbered and squeezed out of space. What you need is the right sequence, and $2 of the right top dressing instead of the wrong one. Find out what's already in your soil, deal with the weeds that physically block seedlings, loosen the ground, seed and fall, cover it with something sterile, water it like a seed rather than like a lawn, and raise that mower. Do that 2 years running, and the lawn that made you want to rent a tiller will be the thickest one on your street, and it'll stay that way because thick grass is the only weed control that never wears off, never needs reapplying, and doesn't cost anything once it's actually there. If you want the full plan mapped out for your specific grass and your specific region, that's what the book is for. It takes everything I've covered here and turns it into a 30-day blueprint you can just follow, with the exact products, the timing, and the order they go down in. The link is in the description, or scan the QR code on the screen. Now I want to hear from you and be specific if you can. Let me know what's the dominant weed in your lawn right now. Dandelions, clover, crabgrass, creeping Charlie, or something you can't put a name to. Because the answer genuinely changes the plan, and if enough of you name the same one, then that's the next video I make. Let me know. I'll see you in the next one.